The story begins one night at a company dinner where everyone is celebrating the operational success of Team 1. One of the colleagues is very happy that Miss Nari has finally joined a company dinner, but he wants to know why she isn't drinking. She replies that it's because she has to go back to the office to finish some work, and one of the other employees points at her with a spoon. He says he understands her need to be promoted, but to build team spirit, she needs to participate in things. And he is disappointed in her. Clearly drunk, he continues, saying that working hard requires playing hard, since there is a time and place for everything. Then he turns to the man at the end of the table and asks if he isn't right. The man doesn't seem to care much about what's happening, simply saying, maybe, but that he doesn't really care. Nari thinks about what a jerk this guy is, but before she can say anything, her phone vibrates. It's her aunt again. Once outside, she answers the call. Her aunt complains about why she didn't pick up the phone earlier, since she knows who it is, so she should answer quickly. Nari says she was at a dinner and that's why she couldn't, and apologizes. Her aunt continues shouting on the phone, saying, "What do you mean, a dinner? Aren't you working, so that's why you didn't answer the phone? Be glad I'm letting it slide this time. When are you going to send the money I asked you for the other day?" Nari gets irritated and replies that she doesn't have that kind of money, and that it will take a while for her to save up those $2,000. Apparently, that doesn't matter, because her aunt continues to be very rude on the phone, saying that even though she is her niece, her aunt was the one who raised her as her own daughter after she was abandoned by her mother, and she should know how difficult it is. So it's a debt she has to pay every day for the rest of her life. And so she goes on, while Nari looks up at the sky, wishing that, for some reason, the sky would fall on everyone, and all of this would end. Nari questions why she is working so hard since her miserable life isn't going to change. As she answers her aunt while walking down the street, she accidentally bumps into someone. Her phone ends up falling on the ground and breaking while her aunt continues to talk nonsense. The man steadies her so she doesn't fall, but not in a very friendly way. Nari sees that it's her boss, who was at the dinner, and apologizes. However, he simply brushes off the coat where she had bumped him and says her phone was old anyway, so she could use this chance to buy a new one as he walks away. Nari is left speechless. How can he be so rude? She notices a black car parked nearby, but since she wants to get back to the office quickly, she pays it no mind. Arriving at the office, still furious about her boss's words telling her to buy a new phone, if he expects that to happen, he could just give her the money. He probably doesn't even know there are people like her who have to force themselves to go back to the office in the middle of the night just to work overtime and make money, hoping to receive a bonus or, who knows, even better, a promotion. Even though he is younger than Nari, he is already a very wealthy CEO. She remembers the times he criticized her work and thinks that little does he know, it's people like her who have no other choice and are desperate, who work harder and harder. Opening her computer to start working, she takes a deep breath, thinking why the world has to revolve around money. And what's more frustrating is that she simply can't quit this job because of her circumstances. Nari hears a noise and turns to see what it is. As she is about to ask if someone is there, because she heard something, a hand comes from behind and covers her face. He holds her face while threatening her, telling her to be quiet and he will spare her life. Just do as he says. Nari is in complete shock. What is happening? Is this really a real gun? The man continues his threats, saying that if she says a word, he will pull the trigger. And she probably doesn't want to die, right? He shows her a photo and asks her to tell him everything she knows about this man and what their relationship is. However, when she sees the photo, it's a picture of her bumping into the boss. But that's not what happened. She can't even understand how the guy managed to get that shot, as if he had helped her in such a caring manner. Crying desperately for her life, she says she has no idea what this guy wants, but that there must be some misunderstanding. After all, she knows nothing about the boss. The man shoves the gun at her, apparently annoyed at not getting any answers. But before he can continue his sentence, a loud bang goes off in the room. Someone has shot him in the hand. Nari is in shock because at first she doesn't know where the shot came from, if she was the one who was shot or whose blood this is. The gun falls to the floor, and someone from across the room says, "You want to know more about me? Then you should have come and asked me directly. Why are you asking someone who knows nothing?" At that moment, Nari can see that the one who shot the man's hand was none other than her boss, Han Jin. Everyone freezes at the boss's unexpected appearance. He looks at Nari and just says that she's a mess. The poor girl doesn't even know what to say with all the commotion, and she still has blood on her face and clothes. The guy recovers, grabs the gun with his other hand, and points it at the boss. But before he can do anything, the boss shoots him in the leg, causing him to collapse in pain. As Jin approaches the guy, he simply says that hunters are a real pain, and asks the guy what he wants to know about him. As Nari watches the scene, she thinks to herself, What does he mean? Hunters? What is he talking about? Who is this guy? Why is he armed? The boss lunges at the man, beating him. And without stopping the beating, he asks what the guy wants to know about him, looking like a lunatic as blood flies everywhere. Nari thinks this is a great opportunity to get out of there as soon as possible, so she crouches down and starts to sneak away. But just before she can reach the door, someone calls out to her. Her crazy boss says she can't leave after having seen all of this. She looks back in desperation, thinking her life is over. The guy, unconscious and bloodied on the floor, tries to say something. The boss turns to him again, asking what he said, adding that the time for questions is over. At that moment, the guy stabs a syringe into the boss's leg. He manages to pull it out, but it's already too late. The effect of the substance starts to take hold, and he becomes dizzy. And the man on the floor mutters to himself, saying he did it. He did what he was told. Then he bites down on a capsule that was apparently in his mouth, and says that since he has done his part, it is now time for his daughter to be saved. The boss gets up, staggering. He heads toward the protagonist, who is huddled in a corner, trying to use her phone to call the police. But before she can, her boss approaches and grabs her hand, startling her. Sweating, he warns her that if she tells anyone, he will hunt her down and kill her. Before he can finish his sentence, he collapses onto Nari's shoulder. Not knowing what to do, and especially after being threatened, Nari decides to take him to her home. She gets tired, because he is apparently very heavy. She questions whether she is doing the right thing, especially after he threatened to kill her. Remembering everything that happened at the office, she believes that deep down he was somehow trying to protect her. Suddenly, he starts to feel a tremendous pain, and he gets up, turning his back as he starts to bark and tremble. Nari doesn't quite understand if he's in pain or what is happening, but she asks if he wants her to get him some medicine. He ignores her, and, unable to resist any longer, a large poof fills the air, along with a cloud of smoke. As Nari stares in disbelief, she simply sees a small dog in the spot where her boss had been. She wonders what is happening. How can this be? A dog? Where did this dog come from? As she approaches the small dog, she asks where Mr. Jin could be. The dog growls as she tries to calm it down. After all, she doesn't understand the situation herself. But the dog lunges at her and bites her on the neck. At that moment, a bright light fills the room, and another cloud of smoke appears quickly. When the protagonist opens her eyes to see what has happened, she is met by the sight of her boss on top of her, completely naked and with his mouth covered in blood. The two of them are in shock over what just happened. Jean notices the mark on her neck and grabs her arm. Nari asks what's going on. She has no idea what happened. As he licks the remaining blood from his mouth, she asks if he really turned into a dog. He lets go of her hand, puts on his clothes, and without saying or explaining anything, he simply leaves, leaving the poor girl sitting on the floor, completely clueless. The next morning, Nari went to work as if nothing had happened. She stands in front of the office door thinking that perhaps she was a little crazy for going to work after everything that happened yesterday. However, she wouldn't get paid if she skipped work without giving notice. While looking at the office, she thinks that someone died there last night. At that moment, her friend touches her hand, making her scream in fear. He apologizes for scaring her, but he didn't understand why she was standing frozen in front of the door and was just about to say, "Excuse me." She enters, trying to ignore everything that happened and everything she's thinking. After all, it's just a normal office, with employees going about their daily work, everything as it always was, without a single drop of blood anywhere. She wonders if maybe it was all just a nightmare. One of the employees says he's going to buy coffee for everyone and tells them to let him know what they want. He approaches Nari and asks if she wants some caffeine today. Before she can answer, someone slams a hand on her desk. It's her boss, saying that Miss Nari will be handling a matter outside the office with him today. Everyone falls silent. After all, he's the boss, and he just tells her to get a move on. She's afraid, and seeing her hesitate, he approaches and tells her to be quiet and come with him. If she doesn't, things will get ugly. The two of them leave, with her practically dragging her feet in fear. The other employees wonder why the boss chose her to handle an off-site matter with him. Could she be getting a promotion? One of them is even envious. In the elevator, Nari is sure he's going to finish her off. After all, she saw everything that happened yesterday. That strange man, that syringe, him turning into a dog. As she's thinking this, a loud noise comes from the elevator. It starts to shake and then rapidly begins to descend. She's sure it's the boss's doing, that this is probably it. Afraid, she crouches down and begs him to please not kill her. She promises she won't tell anyone what happened last night. She'll take everything she saw to her grave. So, she begs him to please spare her. However, the elevator suddenly stops and the elevator voice says, "You have arrived at basement level 9. The boss, seeing the whole pathetic scene, just tells her to get up and follow him. Still terrified and confused, she follows him. It had never once crossed her mind that something like this existed beneath the office. She notices it's very cold there. Jin tells her to stop looking around and to sit down. Hesitantly, she asks why he brought her here, since she had already said she wouldn't tell anyone and would forget everything from yesterday, which is exactly why she didn't call the police, just as he had asked. She adds that she's feeling very dizzy at the moment. He says she's getting things confused. The elevator dings, and she believes this is either her chance or she's done for. The assistant manager and Jun from her team step out of the elevator. For a moment, she thinks she might be saved and starts to tear up, asking for help. She runs towards them and begs them to please help her, saying that Mr. Jun is threatening to kill her. Jun shoves her, forcing her into the chair. Meanwhile, the assistant manager informs Mr. Jun that they took care of last night's events. Looking at Nari, he says there's just one loose end left. That poof sound and smoke appear again. But this time, a wolf emerges from it and lunges at Miss Nari. Realizing that this time it's not a dog but a wolf, she understands that the assistant manager and her co-worker can also turn into animals. She's worked with them for over 11 months. To think they were all in on this together, able to turn into animals. It's bizarre. She asks the wolf what exactly this company they work for is. Is it really a company, or just a way for them to hide from society? That night, bullets were flying through the office, people were dying, and others were turning into animals. Meanwhile, the employees work normally in the same room every day, oblivious to what is happening. Is this normal? She keeps asking herself. A woman comes out of another room in that place, saying that it really isn't normal, but unfortunately, that's how the world is. For some, this world is abnormal, while for others, it's normal. The wolf turns around, calling this person Honey. Overjoyed, the wolf goes to her side and she asks them to let the young woman go. After all, this isn't a prison. As the wolf transforms back into a human, she introduces herself as Honey. And like these three, she is also a shapeshifter. Extending her hand to the protagonist, Honey welcomes her to the shapeshifter research team. Nari asks what exactly shapeshifter means, and the woman replies that she probably saw it yesterday, how her boss managed to turn into a dog and then back into a human, and now again how Sam turned into a wolf. Everyone here is capable of doing that, and you might even wonder if we are the only ones. But no, approximately 10,000 people are capable of this in Seoul, and that number increases to 50,000 in total in Korea. In the world, this number rises to approximately 7 million. Even with this number of shapeshifters living in society, everyone is in secret, obviously. Nari questions why she is being told all of this. After all, isn't it a secret? The woman replies that it's precisely because she saw everything that happened yesterday, and now there's no turning back. The protagonist tries to say that she isn't interested in anyone's secrets, that she's already busy enough taking care of herself and working. Meanwhile, she gets up and thinks that maybe she has to get the hell out of this place as soon as possible. Walking backwards, she keeps saying that she can keep this secret for the rest of her life. But she ends up bumping into someone. And when she looks back, it's her boss, Jin. He says she doesn't look very well, but she's actually freaking out because she sees a gun in his pocket and is sure she needs to get out of there. She quickly manages to grab his gun and points it in their direction, telling them to let her go, because she has no interest in this shapeshifter business or any other story they want to tell. She just wants to leave. Jin signals for the sub-manager not to interfere. Meanwhile, Nari is still there, saying she just wants to leave, claiming she's just an ordinary employee. He then takes her hand, noticing that she is trembling. Pointing the gun at his own face, he tells her to shoot. Obviously, this makes her even more nervous and tremble more. He just tells her to relax, and he presses his finger against hers on the gun. She closes her eyes, afraid a shot will go off, but the gun just clicks and nothing happens. He takes the gun from her hand and asks what kind of movie she's been watching to not know that guns have a safety lock that needs to be deactivated to work. But he acknowledges that it was a nice try. Realizing there's not much she can do, she simply decides to follow their orders. In a room alone, she waits for them to return, not knowing what will happen. Sam appears with a coffee for her, which even makes her a little emotional. He then says he will let her go, but first she needs to sign a paper, showing her a non-disclosure agreement. Happy, she takes the paper from his hand and signs it without a second thought. She hands the paper back quickly, and he comments that he didn't think she would sign it so easily. But, as is customary, he then asks her to let him threaten her, at least just to play his part. Standing on a chair, he orders her to sign the paper immediately, while she screams that she already signed it, fearing for her life. Leaving the room with the coffee in her hand, she is simply exhausted. And as she returns to the elevator, she thinks that she didn't know Sam was so weird. And what exactly was that paper? Was it a blank sheet or was something written on it, since she didn't even read it and just signed? Before reaching the elevator, she ends up overhearing a conversation. She hides behind a pillar and hears Hani talking to Jin about some kind of imprint he has with Nari. And with a grim expression, he comments that he'll do everything in his power to make it as if this connection never happened. Hani asks if he's going to reverse it, and if so, how he plans on doing it. Since to break an imprint, one of the two has to die, either him or Nari. Hearing this, Nari despairs and ends up tripping over her own feet. She falls to the floor in front of the two of them, spilling the coffee she hadn't drunk. Desperate that they have noticed she was listening to everything, she fears that now they will really get rid of her. Jin approaches her on the floor, saying that for someone who claimed she'd live her life pretending she saw absolutely nothing, she seems to want to witness everything. Does she really want to live an ordinary life? Hani puts a hand on Jin's shoulder and says that's enough. Nari will need to know the truth as soon as possible. She then explains that on that night, Jin and the protagonist ended up marking each other. Imprinting is a ritual normally performed by shapeshifters to create a bond with their partner. Their hormones stabilize as soon as they find a partner. Shuddering to think where this is going, Nari asks if it's like a marriage, and Hani explains that it's not. It's a ritual that can only be performed once in a lifetime. Normally, shapeshifters do this with the person they truly love, because it will completely change both of their lives forever. In other words, it's a bond more important than marriage. Hearing this, Nari runs desperately towards the elevator. She starts frantically pressing the button to get out of there as soon as possible, thinking, what do you mean something more important than a marriage? It also seems that calling the elevator isn't such an easy task, as she stands there for a while and nothing happens. While she screams in desperation, the assistant manager asks if it's okay to let her leave like that, and the boss explains they can just kill her if she says anything. Hani tells them not to worry. After all, she will come back, since she and Jin now have an imprint, and them being apart causes adverse effects. Her coworkers, seeing she's already back from her meeting with the boss, are happy and want to know exactly what she did and if anything happened. But she just sits in her chair and smiles while looking at her screen, wondering if this is really happening. No matter how much she thinks about it, it seems crazy. It was supposed to be just another ordinary day at the office. And luckily, she was bombarded with work from the moment she sat down until it was time to leave, so she didn't get to think much about the matter. It seemed more like those events were part of a dream, something beyond reality that was over, and she was back to her routine. But as if to show that it hadn't been just a dream, she started to see things. For example, a colleague was eating a cookie at work, and she wondered if that woman was also a shapeshifter, perhaps a hamster. Another colleague was sleeping at work, inside a locker, and she questions if he could possibly be a bear. Maybe even the department head could be an eagle. Going up the stairs, continuing her work, she thought how very strange it was to have animals in the midst of all this, passing as humans. And she remembers that her boss was a dog, but he was more like a puppy, and he was actually kind of cute. She is startled by her boss, who calls out to her suddenly, and she notices the stark difference in his human form, which is not cute at all. Annoyed, he asks why she doesn't just tell the entire office who the shapeshifters are. Nari says she can't help it, because it's the first time she's found out about this, so it's a bit difficult for her to act natural. He asks if she has experienced anything strange during the day, like something different with her body or out of the ordinary. For a moment, she doesn't understand why he's asking that, until she remembers Hani's words regarding the bond the two of them had created, and she concludes that perhaps he is already worrying about her because of it. Nervous that this is really the case, she pushes him and says she's fine, telling him to get out of the way. He gets annoyed but says nothing as she nervously goes down the stairs. Back at her desk, she doesn't know what worries her more. The fact that there are all these shapeshifters in the company without her having any idea, or the fact that her boss is now worrying about her. Her colleague, seeing all this, asks if she's really okay, because she seems a little strange today. The protagonist says that everything is fine. It's just that a lot has happened today, so she's still trying to process it all. Approaching her colleague, she decides to ask a somewhat bold question: what he would do if he discovered that humans could turn into animals. But before she can complete the sentence, the assistant manager walks by, looking at her with a very unfriendly expression, and holds up the agreement she had signed. Seeing this, she is now certain that he is a meerkat. Realizing that his colleague is going through a difficult time, the young man decides to try and help her. And when he searches for information about humans turning into animals, he remembers a writer named Jun, who always uses this theme in his novels. Believing she might be a fan of his, he decides to give the project to her. A few days later, Nari realizes she simply can't focus on work, thinking about everything that has happened and seeing that her colleagues are actually animals. In the meeting room, one of her managers says she hopes they can finish everything promised for this week without any issues. She then asks Nari how the preparations for the interview with the writer Jun are going. The protagonist, completely confused, asks what interview she's talking about as she knows nothing about it, which makes the manager a bit flustered, since the interview is tomorrow. Nari still thinks there has been some misunderstanding, but the manager doesn't want to hear excuses and tells her to get it all done today for approval before she leaves. Her colleague, who is tearfully listening to the whole exchange, hugs Nari and apologizes. He says that he simply forgot to tell her that he had included it in the project. Since she had commented about humans turning into animals that day, he thought she was a fan of the writer, and that's why he put her in charge of the project. But he ended up forgetting to tell her. Seeing there wasn't much she could do, she asks if the project at least offers incentives. The next day, she is arranging the papers for the interview, thinking about how her colleague always makes these innocent mistakes from time to time. She's a little irritated by it all, but remembers he said there was a big incentive for the project that everyone wanted. That was the only reason she decided to accept this mess. Jun is a genius writer who rose in popularity very quickly. He normally keeps everything about himself private, including his name and his appearance. And the fact that he is so mysterious and writes suspense novels has made him a bestseller. As she wonders what kind of person he is and how she'll manage to convince him to publish his book with them, she notices her arm has been itching lately. A handsome man approaches, saying it's a pleasure to meet her. He introduces himself as Jun and asks if she is Nari. Shocked to see he is a cat, she can only manage to answer yes. A moment after the shock, she hands him her business card, introducing herself as Nari and thanking him for the coffee. Besides being handsome, he also seems kind, telling her not to worry, since no one knows what he looks like. It's common for him to be the first to introduce himself. He mentions that he looked over the proposal she sent. He found it very interesting and asks if she wrote it herself, which she confirms. He mentions he was very impressed with her analysis, in which she said she could feel a sense of anger through his writing. It was almost as if he were trying to suppress the source of all that anger, and that the relief readers feel when a case is solved is akin to the freedom that comes from successfully suppressing that same anger. Of course, while he was speaking, all she could notice was how beautiful his hands and his voice were. He says it's the first time someone has offered an analysis different from the others, using words like anger, hatred, desire, and freedom. Nari isn't sure if this was a positive comment or not, but she explains she simply wrote what she thought when she read his stories, and that it wasn't meant as a critique. It was just that she felt those emotions bubbling up from the writing. She adds that perhaps those feelings might be her own. Seeing he has no response, she apologizes, saying that perhaps she was a bit out of line. She adds that it might not be just her, but that other readers might also sense a contradiction. Before she can finish explaining, he says he'll do it, that he'll work with her on his next novel. Before he can say anything, she apologizes and says she'll call him later, since she has started feeling something strange in her body. Sam enters the room noticing something is wrong and asks if this is the so-called adverse defect, and explains that the assistant manager has already gone to get her. But Jim believes that's not enough and that he needs to find her in person. Sam questions if he's really going to leave the office like this. And the moment they step out of the office, everyone is stunned. How adorable the puppy Sam is holding is. Taking advantage of his boss being defenseless, he jokes around and asks if people want to pet the puppy. Not knowing what to do with the fur appearing on her arm, Nari tries to hide it with her hands. She gets up a few times to look and wonders if this is dog fur. Jun, who doesn't understand anything that's happening, asks if she's okay. Nari replies that she's fine, just feeling a little unwell, but nothing too out of the ordinary, until a second puff occurs with dog fur now appearing. He notices she got nervous, stands up, and asks if he'd like to take her to the hospital. She says no, that she's fine. She's just going through something she can't quite explain at the moment. Finally, she realizes that the dog fur probably has something to do with her boss. Before she can take any action, Jun stands up and places his coat on her, which is surprising since he didn't notice the dog fur emerging from her chest. But okay. Jun remarks that she seems cold and that maybe it would be better for them to wrap up today's interview and for her to see a doctor as soon as possible, mentioning that she doesn't need to worry about his coat either, since she can simply return it the next time they meet. She bids farewell, apologizing profusely, and runs off, while he watches with the look of someone who knows what's going on. Sam is running with Jun in his arms while the dog is pissed, because Sam trolled him by having people pet him. The assistant manager contacts Sam saying he had been keeping an eye on her, but he lost sight of her when she ran off. At that moment, she opens the office door. Oh man, what a mess. Her colleague asks how the meeting went, but she doesn't even answer. She just asks where the boss is. All covered by the coat, She searches for him throughout the office like a crazy person. Meanwhile, he's behind her, desperate, looking for where she ended up, until finally they meet in the office corridor, and as if by magic, he returns to his human form, of course naked. In the basement, Hani is enjoying music while calmly drinking her coffee, until the two arrive shouting, asking what is happening and why they're feeling these things. She then explains that imprinting is a very significant act for a shapeshifter, precisely because it serves to stabilize their hormones and prevent transformation. Whenever a shapeshifter feels a very strong emotion, they end up changing into animal form without noticing. And because of that, it would be very difficult to keep it hidden in society. Precisely why imprinting is so important, as it helps them control this change and remain stable. In addition, one condition must be fulfilled to achieve perfect imprinting. And this condition is precisely the two involved being in love. With shock at this information, they clearly failed this condition and therefore have formed an imperfect bond. Hani says that perhaps this isn't a bad thing, because in fact it's impossible to undo a perfect bond. Nari becomes desperate. How is she going to survive with dog fur growing on her body? Meanwhile, the young woman thinks that if she can't break this bond, she might try to do something to alleviate the adverse effects. She realizes that perhaps the effects occur due to location, maybe distance, or even the increased heart rate, because they were both running. Suddenly, she turns around and says she has a hypothesis. Perhaps the two bodies have developed an inability to stay apart from each other. This information clearly leaves both of them nervous and unsure how they will resolve. Hani decides that it might be important to conduct some tests. The first phase is to separate the two by approximately 5 meters, and instantly some side effects began to appear, coming to the conclusion that the two need to maintain a certain distance to remain in human form. Sam comments, "Your bodies need one another." And Nari gets angry with him, telling him to stop making it seem stranger than it already is. Hani says that until they find a way to eliminate the side effects, it would be important for the two to maintain a proximity of up to 5 meters from each other. She comments that the only vacant room there in the research center is precisely the one next to Jim's, creating a somewhat awkward atmosphere. He says that it seems there will be no other solution. And getting up, he says that perhaps it's time to clean that room anyway. Sometime later, and somehow, the protagonist ended up temporarily moving into the research center. And in the room next to Jim's, Nari ended up not refusing the offer, because it's always good to save on rent. But she knows she can't stay there forever. That room she was in, even though it was in the basement and had no natural light, it somehow seemed full of life. She ends up finding a photo. It was apparently a photo of Jim with someone else. But before she could see properly, he appears and takes the photo from her hand, saying that he had probably forgotten it here. And she asks that next time he please knock on the door before entering. Jim looks serious as he tells Nari that he promises to find a way to end all of this soon, as quickly as possible. That way, she will be able to forget that this ever happened in her life and return to normal. Before she can respond, he simply leaves the room. And Nari realizes that she had never seen that expression on Jim before, and she asks if perhaps the person who owned this room has something to do with it. She receives a message from Jun, saying that he hopes it wasn't anything serious and that he'll see her at the next interview. When she remembers Jun, she knows that she initially was only on the project because of the incentive and her colleague's mistake. But he really seems to be a good person. She ends up falling asleep quickly while her aunt is calling her on the phone again. The next day, they are going to work, and Nari thinks that at least the good thing is she doesn't have to take the subway or any public transport to get to work. Jim warns her that if she doesn't want to become a furball in the middle of the office, she'd better make sure to report every move she makes to him. When they arrive on the office floor, it seems there's some commotion. Nari approaches and asks what's happening. Everyone falls silent and looks a bit embarrassed, until one of her colleagues says that a woman claiming to be Nari's aunt is causing a scene outside the office. Nari runs off to see what's happening, and when she gets outside, she sees her aunt arguing with the security guard, saying her niece works here so they can't expel her. As soon as she sees Nari, she asks why she hadn't answered the phone. Forcing her to come to this place, Nari says this is her workplace, so she can't just show up and make a scene like that. But her aunt doesn't seem to care as she extends her hand asking for the money, the $2,000 she had mentioned. Her aunt says that if Nari had given the money earlier, she wouldn't have come to this place. The protagonist does everything to keep from crying in front of her aunt, especially at her workplace, and questions what she really is to that woman. Annoyed, her aunt begins insulting Nari, saying she's ungrateful, but before she can continue the insults, someone appears asking if it's only $2,000. Jin asks the woman if this will be enough. Nari, embarrassed, asks what Mr. Jim is doing, and her aunt, upon hearing this, changes completely. pretending to be the friendliest person in the world, saying that Nari always talks about the owner of the company she works for. As she pulls Nari along, her aunt mentions that she may not be the happiest girl in the world, but that she hopes the boss will take care of her, while her aunt continues feigning praise for Nari, yet only highlights her flaws, saying she isn't pretty and is extremely shy. Jim doesn't seem to mind much as he fills out a form, until a comment catches his attention, when the aunt says exactly that she's glad Nari didn't take after her mother in terms of taste in men. Irritated, the protagonist can only think how pathetic and humiliating it is that she's grown accustomed to this feeling of helplessness. Jim puts away the pen and hands the woman the form he was filling out, while she obviously thanks him, saying it's more than enough. But before he releases the paper, he decides to remark that Nari truly has a beautiful face, even though he's struggling to find the words, which leaves everyone in shock. He puts his arm around Nari's shoulder and says that, since her aunt made his cutie pie uncomfortable, he asks her not to come to the office again in the future. He turns his back on the two insufferable people and says that if they have nothing more to say, they need to return to work. Inside the office, Nari asks what that was, but Jim simply replies that she needs to replace that old phone of hers and her number as well. After all, why is she entertaining that kind of person? The protagonist thanks him for his help, but says it was something he didn't need to involve himself in. Even so, she promises to return the money as soon as possible. In fact, those two are better off financially than they appear, and they do this as a way to torment her. This comment makes Jim a bit irritated, and Nari continues saying that her uncles will simply gamble away the money he gave. Jin says that if she doesn't like it, she should simply curse them out, ignore their calls, and call the police if they continue harassing her. Upset and embarrassed by the situation, Nari comments that he makes it sound very easy to do all of this. But what does he truly know about her situation? Simply paying someone to leave her alone isn't part of her reality. As she cries, she continues saying that maybe a few $1,000s isn't a loss for him. But for someone like her, it's not easy to ignore the fear that has been growing for years, perhaps even decades. And what he did now is only making her feel more embarrassed. Turning around, she says she promises to pay the money back. No matter how long it takes, Jin is a bit confused whether he helped or only made the situation worse, but he says nothing. Later that night, a man walks down an alley, when suddenly he hears a noise and turns to look. Since he didn't hear anything, he yawns as he continues on his way, but someone jumps over him and quickly injects a liquid into his neck. The man falls to the ground, feeling a strong heat, and suddenly horns begin to sprout from his head. As he looks at the culprit, he can only make out that their eyes are yellow like a feline's. Back at the research center, Ronnie complains about how many more of the shapeshifters who were drugged will show up. The assistant manager comments that there were 4 in total, and that the hunters probably carried out a simultaneous attack. Ronnie tries to understand why they are administering these drugs so aggressively. The young man, who is now the moose, says that fortunately he managed to escape, while Ronnie tells him not to speak because he has to conserve energy. The moose comments that he saw a shapeshifter. He's certain that the person who attacked him was a shapeshifter. Elsewhere, a black kitten enters a room, saying that the drug administration was a success. However, it failed to capture the subjects. Someone seated in a chair asks what it feels like not only to go against the same race as her, but to go so far as to crush them. The black cat transforms back into a human, saying that it was nothing special. The next day, in the office, while Nari works, she remembers that she hasn't spoken to June since. That day, when the first adverse effect occurred, she then decided to reply to the message he had sent to her cell phone. However, before she could finish writing, June appears saying he has a new off-site appointment that she must accompany him to. However, Nari decides she doesn't want to go, and simply says she's busy with something else at the moment. Her boss comes up to her and whispers that Hani says it's urgent, but the protagonist seems unwilling to give in, warning that what she's doing is urgent as well. Seeing that he couldn't convince her, Jin decides to try another approach. He simply grabs her chair and wheels her to the elevator while she shouts what he's doing. However, before leaving, she had managed to send the message to Jun, thanking him for the other day, and asking if he would be available for her to return the coat, to which he quickly replied that he's available at any time. Upon arriving in the basement, Nari is still seated in the chair, arguing with Jin for not letting her stand up until now, on the pretext that she would run away. However, when they reach the basement, Nari sees how many humans have partially transformed into their animal forms, apparently in a not-so-great condition. She quickly stands up and asks what is happening. The 3 who have been caring for all these people for several days are exhausted, sitting on the floor talking. The assistant manager explains that it was an attack by a hunter, and according to the informant they managed to plant, they are planning a new attack tonight at midnight, in a casino. The target is a hyena shapeshifter who works alone during the night shift, and being away from her family makes her an easy target. Therefore, they have no time to lose and need to devise a plan to save her. Hanny says that to prevent new victims, this time they will strike first and strike with everything they've got. Because of that, they will need all possible help, and that includes John. Since the protagonist and he are now a package deal, they will have to go together. Hani asks if it's okay for Nari to accompany the mission. However, before Nari can react, Jean steps forward saying that he never agreed to this and questions why they have to bring her along. Hani explains that it's not because she wants to put Nari in that situation, but they need Jean, and therefore must take Nari with them. Which I don't really understand, right? He's just a puppy. Anyway, and she continues. She understands why he is opposed, especially because she knows he can see it in Nari. But before she can finish the sentence, Jean tells her to be quiet and asks if nothing else matters to her. A tense atmosphere builds between the two, and poor Nari doesn't understand anything. After all, who are they talking about? Hani apologizes and says she only wanted to ask him to come along. Nari decides to intervene, saying she doesn't mind going along, especially because Jean needs to be on this mission. She can very well join the mission and hide in a corner while they do what needs to be done. They both look at her without answering, but it seems to be the only solution. That night at the casino entrance, Sam stays outside to ensure that no one enters the casino that night. Meanwhile, the assistant manager distributes the weapons for them to equip themselves, with everyone preparing. Even Nari receives one, despite not knowing what to do with it. Jin even jokes about how her stance was so good last time. She even fooled him by pretending to know how to shoot. He comes up behind her to help her understand how the weapon works, and she can only think that he's too close. He positions her hand and tells her that she always needs to disengage the safety before aiming. And almost whispering in her ear, he tells her not to forget that like last time. Inside the casino, the activity is normal. They've all already blended in with the other patrons. Or maybe they're just enjoying themselves. Until finally, someone enters through the door. It's a young man with a blemish on his face, and he immediately orders a whiskey from the bartender, who is the target for the night they must protect. As soon as the man drinks his beverage, another approaches, already placing a mask on his face. He simply throws a green smoke bomb and fires a shot into the air, telling everyone not to move. The assistant manager hadn't seen that coming and complains, asking what is really going on. Feeling his body grow weaker, Jin realizes he will lose consciousness, and they all faint in the middle of the casino. The men walk through the casino wearing masks and seeing the bodies lying unconscious on the floor. One of them says that everyone will regain consciousness in an hour and will have no memory of what happened there, since their target is unconscious on the hall table. Even before he can grab the woman, a red chip rolls across the casino floor. The man believes it was an accident that the chip fell from the table, and even starts remarking that this is how he bought his car. However, Sam grabs his hand, saying that this chip is actually his. The others become furious with Sam, since they were pretending to be unconscious. Realizing the plan is failing, the hunters decide to grab the target and run. As soon as they touch the woman at the counter, she drives a knife into the young man's arm. Removing the disguise, it turns out she wasn't the hyena woman, but Hanny, questioning why Sam didn't stick to the plan. The other guy, who is still conscious, begins shooting and reports over the radio that he needs backup. However, before he finishes requesting backup, he's surprised by a bullet to his ear. Jin also complains to Sam that if he had followed the plan exactly, they wouldn't be in this mess. Jin informs the assistant manager that the rest are probably outside, and he replies that he can sense there are about 15. Apparently, they brought the entire gang, so they have to get ready to get out of there. Everyone agrees and heads toward the exit. Jin jumps over the counter to the hidden area behind, crouching. He asks if she's okay, and she nods, holding the gun in a somewhat peculiar way. Extending his hand, he says it's time to go. As they walk, the two men's bodies lie on the ground, and Jim asks her not to look. He leaves her there in an alley and asks her to wait until he returns. Additionally, he leaves her a little pink teddy bear button, somewhat peculiar, and instructs her that if anything happens, she should press that button. And with that, he runs off to find his colleagues. Nari notices that apparently he is being almost too kind to her, and it even reminds her of the day she joined the company, when she didn't know how to do anything and was just a nuisance to everyone. As she recalls what happened inside, Nari wonders if those people were really dragged away, until she hears a meow, and a cute little black kitten approaches her. However, we know very well that this kitten isn't so cute after all. Nari tells the cat that it shouldn't be there. Meanwhile, the rest of her friends are already positioned, waiting for the hunters. The assistant manager warns that they are there, to the side on the left. When Jin looks, there are indeed quite a few of them preparing for an attack. Jin tells everyone that they will strike all at once. They prepare themselves while Sam has already turned into a wolf. Sam runs first and immediately catches one of the men off guard, tossing him into the air. Meanwhile, the assistant manager fights in his human form, in hand-to-hand combat. The others hesitate due to the sudden assault, and even Hani is charging forward in her human form. Jin provides cover, shooting at those behind her, and then she gets into their car. Jin feels disgusted, just from the hunter's blood touching his face. The struggle continues among them, and Jin worries, because Nari is too quiet in the alley he left her in. Sam corners one of the hunters right beside Jin, whom he quickly knocks out. One of the hunters notices that Jin is strategically positioned in that area, blocking the advance. He wonders if there is something there, but before he can act, the assistant manager appears and takes the gun from his hand. However, at the same time, another man seems to have thought the same thing and attacks Jin from behind, who manages to dodge the main attack. However, the man punches him in the face immediately afterwards. Realizing that now would be the chance to pass through the area that was being blocked, the man advances. Jin runs after him, afraid he might hurt Nari, but to his surprise, there is no one there in the corner anymore. He is shocked that Nari is no longer there. At that very moment, Hani comes speeding in the car, shouting at Jin to get out of the way. She plows through all the other hunters until crashing the car into a pole. Getting out of the car, she asks where Nari is, and Jin says that she has disappeared. A pebble falling on the roof draws their attention. When they look, it's that girl who turns into a cat. She runs off as if she wants them to follow her, and Hani remembers what the moose said that day, that the hunter who attacked him was a shapeshifter. Sam decides it would be ideal to pursue her, but Hani is concerned about finding Nari. Quickly, Jin jumps onto the rooftop and says that the shapeshifter has Nari's scent. Somewhere nearby, Nari is tied up in a warehouse, the tracking device broken on the floor. She is still trying to understand what happened, since it all happened so fast, and as a result, she didn't even manage to press the button. Perhaps if she can free her hands, she can access the weapon in her back pocket, but apparently a man is watching what she's doing, and he asks what a normal human like her is doing among the shapeshifters. He even says that in their case, they don't have much choice. After all, they need to feed their families, but she seems too young to be doing this. That's when the protagonist realizes that the hunters are practically mercenaries. They're paid to hunt and capture the shapeshifters. She questions him, saying that he's putting food on the table while kidnapping and killing other people. This makes him angry, and he starts cursing and asking who she thinks she is to speak to him like that, especially since he had been nice to her. While he disengages the safety on the weapon, he tells Nari to enjoy as much as she can, because once that bastard shows up, they won't need her anymore. After running for a bit, it begins to rain heavily. Jim realizes that since he hasn't transformed yet, Nari is probably nearby, and that shapeshifter could easily escape from him if she wanted to, but it appears she is doing it deliberately to make them follow her. It's obvious that this is a trap, but at the moment he has no other choice. Meanwhile, the man starts to grab some tape to gag Nari, saying he won't just sit and watch his family die, since he needs to provide for them. Nari, now unable to say anything, becomes increasingly worried about where this will lead. At that moment, Jim manages to locate her, and she is very happy that he came to get her. The man who is threatening her continues to aim his gun at her, saying that the monster has finally arrived. Ordering Jim to lower his gun, he presses it against Nari's head. Jim feigns stepping back for a moment, telling the man to calm down. After all, he doesn't want to kill anyone uninvolved in all of this. He places the gun on the ground. As he watches to see if the man has taken it off Nari's head, Jin asks what the man wants in order to release Nari. However, he feels a wave of dizziness and remembers another rainy night in an abandoned building. He attempts to compose himself, and the man says there's something they've always wanted. For you filthy shapeshifters to be destroyed by our own hands and presented to humans as the trash you are, the man says to Jin. He shoves Nari's head onto the ground, saying that this woman is nothing more than bait to lure him here and finish him off. Jin again recalls another scene with a woman held captive as a hostage. The woman tells him to take a deep breath and hang on tight, asking him not to come close. While he is still somewhat dazed by his memories, he says aloud that he should have gone to her, even though she told him not to. The man realizes that Jin is visibly distracted and isn't even listening to what he's saying. Nari, being threatened, sees that Jin is acting very strangely. In his memory, Jin returns to the rainy night. Two men threaten that woman as she tells him not to come near. The man, just to make the situation worse, presses the gun harder against Nari and tells her that apparently that guy doesn't care about her at all, whether she lives or dies. She begins to think that she might have to come up with another plan. Nari tries to reach the fallen glass, but before she can grab the glass, the man presses the trigger a bit harder, saying it's the end for her. At that moment, Jim, I'm not sure if he had regained consciousness or not, begins to run toward the man, and he is seeing scenes of reality, mixed with scenes from his past. 2 loud bangs are heard, and some drops begin to trickle down along with the rain. Jin, in his memories, stood frozen as he watched what had happened. That woman lay on the ground lifeless while the rain mingled with his tears. At that moment, a fierce rage surges through his body. However, a scream brings him back to reality. When he looks, he sees Nari with blood-stained hands and a gun in her hand. She looks at Jean in desperation, saying that she shot the guy. Let's be honest, he was utterly useless, and poor Nari had to save herself. But okay, she falls to the ground, still unable to believe what she did, and everyone else rushes over, worried about what was happening since they heard gunshots. Hani quickly covers Nari with her coat, while Sam, in wolf form, attacks the man lying on the ground. Jin can't even believe that somehow it all worked out, and looking up at the sky, he sees the sun rising. Back in the basement, Rani asks if Nari needs anything, reminding her that her door is always open, even in the middle of the night. She then hugs Nari and apologizes for having forced the protagonist to go through all of this. But Nari says it's not her fault. She didn't force her at all. Besides, it's all in the past now. She said that so confidently to Rani, but reality is different. She is in her room, trembling, unable to sleep, just replaying that scene over and over in her mind, thinking about the man she shot and how she could do that to someone. In her imagination, she panics and tries to run away, but someone grabs her arm, and it's that same man telling her she did it and will never forget. Now her hands are covered in blood. She wakes up in a fright, unable to sleep anymore. She then decides to get a glass of water to see if she can forget all of this. The assistant manager appears in the kitchen, asking if she's having trouble sleeping. In Jim's room, he stares at the photo frame with that picture of the other woman, and he remembers the night when it all happened. The moment he saw her lying there, he simply couldn't believe it was really happening. But he had to do everything he could to control his emotions and not transform in front of those men. Obviously, that was impossible. And suddenly, poof, he turns into a puppy and runs away. Still shaken by all his memories, Rani opens the bedroom door and comes in to see if he's all right. She remarks that Nari is truly a very strong person. Even when he lost control and imprinted on her, she was braver than anyone else. Having only recently discovered shapeshifters, she overcame her fears and helped us on the mission. Moreover, she survived on her own strength. She asks if Jim doesn't also think Nari is incredible, noting that Nari and Hyle, the woman from his memories, are completely different. She adds that it's time for Jin to free himself from all this curse of his past, since, after all, he and the entire team ended up turning their world upside down, so that's why they need to help her get through all of this. Not because of past feelings, but out of guilt and responsibility in the present, Jim seems to have finally understood what Hanny meant. He leaves his bedroom, he takes a green album, returns, and sits with it on the bedroom floor. Then he takes that photo from the picture frame and finally places it into the album, revealing that this is the album of all the memories he had with Hyle, thus appearing to finally be freeing himself from his past. The assistant manager makes tea to help Nari sleep, and she asks if he often drinks tea, to which he replies that he does not. He comments that staying calm and still managing to protect her in that situation would have been difficult even for a highly trained agent. Nari asks if he thinks she really did the right thing. She says that the man appeared in her dreams, and regardless of the reason or her conclusion in doing that, the fact that she shot someone does not change. He was probably already a goner, right? She asks the assistant manager. Nam decides to talk about his past before he started working for their company. In the past, he was a bloodthirsty gangster, beating and threatening people for money. He had a boss who, at the time, encouraged him to do it. And without a doubt, he was a piece of scum. Someone who could not tell right from wrong. Intimidating people and violence were the only things he knew how to do. At the time, he did not understand other ways he could use his strength. And even today, words cannot describe how much he regrets his past actions. Nari comments that surely he had his reasons for doing that at the time. But he replies that no one becomes a gangster for justifiable reasons. One of the events that marked his memory was a day he beat up a man. And even while lying on the ground, the man asked them if they considered themselves truly human. After all, the only thing those people wanted was to live a normal, dignified life. So why was that gang doing this? Because of those words, Sam knew that he could not be forgiven. Even when he had the chance to stop, he continued to shift his focus to something else. His boss at that time was very grateful to him for being the strongest, and at that time offered him a job that would pay double. Of course he accepted. His boss at the door said there was no need to be nervous. Just go in there and find the guy. As soon as he entered the place, the door closed behind him. He tried desperately to open it, but to no avail. Startled, he realizes they threw something, and when he looks, there is a large net to trap him. Unable to do much, he ends up falling into the net, and immediately afterwards, several syringes are thrown in his direction. He tries to defend himself, but the syringes still hit his arm, and in this way, he immediately begins to feel sick and falls to the ground, until suddenly, he transforms into a meerkat. Trying everything to escape, he bites the net until he tears it, and thus manages to flee. Getting to a corner, he sits for a moment to recover and manages to return to his human form. Instead of feeling betrayed, he could only feel that he was being punished for his sins, the sins of having ruined countless lives. Thus, as if from nowhere, someone appears beside him, asking if he is a shapeshifter. Quickly, he jumps back, preparing to defend himself. But the man says he is one too, so he doesn't need to worry. He was Jin's father, known to everyone, leader of the Korean Shapeshifter Society, Mr. Jisong, and that's how they met for the first time. Mr. Jisong asked him if he didn't know this building was full of hunters. Nam explains that he knew nothing, that he was only sent there to check on some matters. Jin's father explains that those traps belong to him, and because of that, they have all been activated now, and the syringe was a neutralizer. But sensing the threat, he says he will need his help. Mr. Jisong remarks that his calloused hands likely indicate he knows how to fight, and asks if he was doing it to survive. Beginning the briefing on the plan, he explains that the objective is to reach the top, and since there is no electricity, they must use the stairs. Since the trap was triggered as soon as Nam entered the building, the hunters probably already know there's an intruder, so they need to act quickly. Even before they begin climbing, Nam says he can sense 4 people on the floor above them, and 5 on each subsequent floor. He explains that this is a special ability because he is a meerkat, which Mr. Jisong highly approves of, since it's very useful. One of the hunters watches the sunset between the stairwells until he is surprised by a blow to the back of the neck. Apparently Nam can no longer keep climbing the stairs, and Mr. Jisong asks if he isn't too young to already be so out of shape. He adds that it's great to have someone so vigilant by his side. Since his senses are so sharp, he'll probably use that in everyday life. Nam replies that he does, but remembers the terrible things he did using his ability. Before he can vent, several sounds of fighting are heard on the upper floor, and they continue climbing, defeating all the hunters in their path. Nam asks what exactly is on the top floor that Mr. Jisong would be alone in a place like this. As he looks at the guard standing at the door, he says he will soon find out. He quickly takes the man by surprise, defeating him. He then begins to pick the lock of the door. Shortly thereafter, reinforcements appear. Nam reacts quickly, defeating one of them, but the other manages to get through and heads toward Mr. Jisong with a bat. Before he can land the attack, Nam runs forward and blocks the blow with his arm. However, due to the force applied, it also hits his head, causing it to bleed. Even so, he reacts and knocks the man out. Mr. Jisong realizes he can count on Nam to continue opening the door, but 2 more henchmen appear, attempting to shoot them both. However, before they can hit, Nam rushes forward and quickly knocks both of them out. Reaching his limit just as Jisong manages to open the door, he collapses to the ground, a bit dazed, and from that locked door emerge several shapeshifter children. As Nam loses consciousness, he realizes that this was what they were trying to save. Or rather, what Jisong had been trying to save from the beginning. Sometime later, he wakes up in a hospital room. Someone tosses a can in his direction. It is Mr. Jisong who is there. Nam has many questions to ask, but he decides to ask first why Mr. Jisong risked so much in that place, knowing there were so many hunters. He says as if it were nothing, that it was because he was sure Nam would help him. And as if to taunt him, Mr. Jisong asks Nam how he felt. After all, he didn't just save Mr. Jisong, but helped rescue those innocent children who had been kidnapped by the hunters. It was precisely those strong hands of yours that helped make this happen. Placing a small piece of paper in Nam's hand, Mr. Jisong says that this is what strength should be used for. As he leaves, he finishes the phrase, saying that giving back or protecting something is better than taking something. Nam becomes very thoughtful for the first time, trying to focus on what matters and not just divert his attention from what is right. Looking at the paper, he notices that it is Mr. Jisong's publisher's card. Back in the present time, Nam, who is now the assistant manager, apologizes to Nari for telling such a long story, but he wanted to explain to her exactly what the company's former owner had told him. Thus, he bows to Nari and thanks her for using her courage and strength to keep not only herself but also them, the shapeshifters, safe. She becomes somewhat frustrated, not knowing what to respond to such formality, and simply says she is glad to have been able to help, realizing that the assistant manager was trying to help ease her conscience a bit, and she says that now she understands why he told her that story. Changing the subject, not that much, Nari asks what Jin's father was like. Was he the one who founded the publishing house? Nam comments that he was a man with broad shoulders, so broad that you felt you would never lose your way while following him. Noticing that the assistant manager always uses the past tense when referring to Jin's father, Nari asks if by any chance he has already passed away. Nam explains that unfortunately Mr. Jisung disappeared last year. Returning to his room, Nam finds Jin in the hallway and says that perhaps he should say something to Nari as well. Seeing that Jin didn't answer, he asks if that's not why he's standing there, waiting in the hallway in the middle of the night. But it seems that Jin is feeling guilty for not saving her and says he has no right to face her. The next day, Jim is in the basement trying to figure out what's going on with that girl who turns into a cat. Why would a shapeshifter ally herself with the hunters? He recalls that she seemed to be around 20 years old, and he begins researching the information he has on shapeshifters. Until, in the system, he finds a perfect match. According to the system, theoretically, she has been missing since June. With this information, he wonders, where could these missing people be? Before, he believed they had perhaps been attacked by hunters and that's why they were missing. But could it be possible that some of them are working for the hunters? He sees the photo of his father, who has been missing since October, which makes him a bit annoyed at that hypothesis. On the upper floors in the office, one of Nari's colleagues is working while staring at her, believing that she is working hard again, which even excites him, wanting to be as professional as she is. But the truth is that she is sleeping. The manager notices and abruptly wakes her up. Before she falls out of the chair, Jim appears holding her and says it was actually because he made her work overtime yesterday. He also tells her that he needs her to come to his office. Everyone in the office is surprised at how their relationship has changed in the last few days. Some are even jealous. In the office, Jim tells Nari that he needs to ask her something. But when he looks at her, he sees she doesn't seem well, and she says she couldn't sleep the night before. He then stands up, seats her on the sofa, and places a coat over her shoulders. Back at her chair, he tells her to rest until the end of the night, promising to keep it secret from her manager. After some time, as always, Sam enters Jim's office without knocking. He notices Nari sleeping on the sofa, and Jim asks him to be quiet. Sam then takes advantage and lies down on the sofa too. Of course, Jin questions what he's doing, but Sam says he's tired too. Before he can lie down, he's kicked out by the boss. After a long nap, Nari wakes up all disheveled, not even knowing where she is, and asks Jim how long she slept. He comments that she was probably very tired. After all, she even snored, while she panics, apologizing. He sits beside her to fix her hair and says he was only teasing, trying to break that awkward mood between them from yesterday. Jim comments that she was probably having a good sleep. Smiling, Nari says that for the first time, yes, changing the subject, or rather returning to it, Jean explains the real reason he called her to his office. He asks if yesterday, before she was kidnapped, she had contact with anyone other than the hunters. Recalling the events of last night, Nari says she doesn't remember anything, until Jin points out that animals count too, and then she remembers that, yes, while she was in the alley, a black cat approached her, and even though she spoke to it, it stayed still, watching her, then disappeared. Jin realizes it really was that shapeshifter, but he doesn't understand why she didn't attack Nari. Moreover, she did everything to lead them to Nari. Jin then asks if Nari, for some reason, had seen that cat before. Back at Hunter HQ, the boss in the chair, whose identity remains unknown, says she was acting very out of character, asking if, by any chance, she thinks he wouldn't find out. Apparently, he is scolding that girl who turns into a cat. She remembers that years ago, while listening to music, a truck was about to run her over. But before she could become another character in an isekai, she managed to escape. The driver got out to check, but was confused to find no one there. And in an alley near the accident, there was an injured kitten trembling all over. It began wandering aimlessly, its little paw injured, until it grew skittish as someone approached, who coincidentally was Nari. Upon seeing the injured kitten, she approached and promptly called a veterinarian, asking if she could bring a cat that needed urgent treatment for its leg. Because of the bleeding, the kitten ended up losing consciousness. Back in the present, the girl became apprehensive but did not reveal why she did it. The boss said it was okay if she didn't talk, since, after all, everyone has a story. However, she mustn't forget the reason she decided to do it in the first place back at the publisher, and it was a round trip. Nari said she didn't remember having seen that kitten before. Returning Jim's coat, she said that if there was nothing else she could help with, she would go back to work. She thanked him for the coat and the nap, and somewhat embarrassed, asked if she could perhaps request a favor. After hearing the favor, Jim promptly replied no, and Nari tried to explain that June is the author of the most anticipated book of the year's start, so expectations for this project are very high. So, as the person responsible for the project, wouldn't she attend the meetings with him? Just because she couldn't be physically away from Jim, he said that wasn't the only problem. And if something happened while she was there, and if she were attacked, how would she explain that to Jun? He then suggested that perhaps it would be better to assign someone else to the project, since there wasn't much reason for her to continue on it. Not wanting to leave the project, Nari asked if he had forgotten that she went on a dangerous mission because of him, and even teased him by saying she almost died on that mission, and he couldn't even grant this simple thing to her. Cornered, only one option remained: for him to attend her meeting with the author Jun. Seeing Jun's message, Nari explained that he was arriving shortly and asked her boss to go somewhere nearby. Jun got irritated because she made him go there and now wanted him to hide. She explained that the author keeps his identity secret, so he might be uncomfortable seeing anyone besides her there without permission. Looking around, he retorted that there wasn't even anywhere to hide. Nari pointed to the bathroom door near the table. Not believing what she had gotten herself into, Jin ended up in his new hiding spot, the bathroom. Obviously, it wasn't a good place since several people kept knocking, complaining that he was taking too long. Seeing Jun's profile on her phone, Jin had the feeling that something seemed off about this guy. Meanwhile, at the table, Nari returned the coat to Jun, thanking him, and said she was glad to see that she was doing better. Nari tried to focus, even while admiring Jun's beauty, and said she had read the synopsis of the new novel he sent. Unlike his other novels, she was impressed that this time the main conflict between the characters would be a romantic friction. She said she was excited to see something different since he normally doesn't write about love. Jun replied that this was true. He had never even thought of writing about it before, but he could say that he was a bit intrigued, poor thing. "Why is she doing this, sir? But we wanted to talk." "No, I think he's the big bad boss." Quite the spitting image, right? Seeing that she still hadn't responded to his hint, he simply gives a small smile. Nari wonders if all this flirting is just in her head, or if it's really happening. Trying to concentrate, she wonders how someone like him could be interested in her. Deciding to ask about the novel, she says she was intrigued to know why he's featured a human who constantly transforms into an animal in his works from the very start. And even in this new novel, the same premise applies? By any chance, is there a particular reason you write this way? He smiles and asks if, by any chance, she has ever seen a human transform into an animal before. And he says that he himself has witnessed it before. But the boy is smooth, and he amends his phrasing by saying he meant in a figurative sense. Of course. Nari breathes a sigh of relief, having been frightened that he might also know about shapeshifters. He explains that the figurative meaning refers to someone living an ordinary life who actually has two faces, being deceptive and possessive, like a wild side hidden from others. This makes her think of herself, and perhaps even of what happened that night. However, is hiding part of yourself or trying to conceal your weakness really such a bad thing? Nari tells Jun that, in fact, she's always felt a bit uneasy about the villains in his novels and how they're always desperately trying to hide their secrets. She doesn't believe it's so wrong to keep something private. After all, everyone has a secret they don't want to share, as long as that secret doesn't harm others. To her, the real villains are those who expose it. He glances at his watch and says he has another appointment, so he must leave. Nari agrees and bids him farewell. But before he goes, he drops a case on the floor and tells Nari that in this world, there are secrets that can hurt others. He bends down to pick up the case that fell and returns it to her. Jun says he really enjoyed their conversation today and that they can meet again at the next session. He also points to her lips and says that shade suits her very well, which makes the poor girl blush furiously. From the bathroom, Jim watches the entire embarrassing scene. Realizing there were intentions beyond work in insisting on this meeting, he wonders if that guy is her type. As Jim walks toward Nari, he passes by Jun and feels a strange sensation. But when he looks, Jun is no longer there. Nari asks if they're heading straight back to the office. And agreeing with her, Jim begins to think it can't be. That guy's the same bastard he knows. Outside, Jun mutters to himself that Jim hasn't changed at all. In the car back to the company, the mood is tense. Jim aware of the whole situation that happened, and Nari all shy from the flirting she received. Unable to hold back, he comments that now he understands why she was so insistent on this meeting. She pretends she doesn't quite understand what he means, but he asks her to look at herself in the mirror and see how she looks now, since her cheeks and ears are red. When he looks at her to comment on her lip, he himself turns red with embarrassment, saying that her lip actually looks like a tomato. Annoyed, Nari asks what it has to do with him if her face or lips are red. He says it really has nothing to do with him, but he would like to say that the lipstick she chose today doesn't suit her at all. Unlike the reaction he expected, that left her a bit upset. She wipes the lipstick off with her own shirt, and when she looks at him all smeared, she asks if he is happy now, walking off angrily back to the office. He realizes he messed up. Running her hand over her smudged lipstick, Nari is irritated that she got excited over something so silly. When she returns to the office, her colleague asks how the meeting went, but Nari interrupts, asking if by any chance she wears lipstick. She then hands that lipstick over. It was a lipstick, not the case. Wow, it looked huge to her colleague, and says she only used it once, but it didn't suit her. And if she doesn't want to wear it, she can simply toss it out. Seeing that she is a bit upset, her colleague decides not to comment further on the matter. Nari says goodbye to Lee, but just as she walks away, an ominous shadow approaches from behind her colleague. When she turns around, she is confronted by Mr. Jin, who asks if by any chance she is close to Nari. As soon as Nari arrives in her room, her phone begins to ring. When she looks, it's a message from her colleague saying that Mr. Jin practically interrogated Nari, asking about her preferences. Her colleague says she is scared and doesn't know what is happening. Nari realizes that he is probably feeling guilty for what he said to her, and is trying to get her to say that everything is fine, which makes her even more irritated, because he isn't doing this out of remorse, but only because he wants to ease his conscience, since she won't do what he wants. As soon as he enters the basement, he sees Nari in the kitchen, and with a forced smile, he says he noticed she left early, which makes her even more annoyed, and she doesn't even respond to him. At dinner time, everyone is gathered, eating and chatting normally, except for Jim, who isn't quite sure what to do for Nari to forgive him. He decides to take the first step and asks if she can talk with him later. Of course, she refuses, saying she's very busy, and everyone eats the food, curious about what's going on. He asks exactly what she is busy with, which makes her practically fling a little egg at his face. And with a somewhat angry look, she asks what gives him the right to ask that. Ronnie realizes there's a very tense atmosphere between them. Later, still not giving up, Jim stands in front of Nari's bedroom door. Upon knocking, she tells him to come in, and inside she's there with the assistant manager and Sam, reading some books. Nari comments that they are in the middle of the book club meeting, so she says she will return later. Again, he knocks on the door, and this time she is training boxing with Ronnie. She informs him that she's in the middle of training and can't talk right now. Again, he says he'll come back later. Ronnie starts rolling on the floor laughing, saying she's never in her life seen Jim act this way. It's simply hilarious. After her laughing fit, she tells Nari that perhaps it would be better for her to stop avoiding the club. After her shower, Nari comes out of the bathroom and comes face to face with Jim waiting for her outside. He asks if they can finally talk now. Not believing that he was literally waiting for her to finish her shower, Nari questions what could be so important that he wants to talk about. He says that he would like to apologize, since he never intended to hurt her feelings. It's just that she seemed different from usual, and that ended up bothering him a bit, which leaves Nari speechless, embarrassed. It even felt like more of a confession. Jim says that what he said about the lipstick not suiting her wasn't true. Quickly, he turns away, saying that it's getting late and that she should also go to sleep, since he doesn't want her yawning and dozing off at work tomorrow, although it was obvious that his neck was completely red. Back in her room, Nari wonders exactly what that was. Could it be that Lee asked him to apologize or something? But when she looks at the message, Lee says she just told him she didn't know and ran away. So probably no one forced him to say those things. The next day at the office, everyone is impressed by something on the computer, which is a kitten dressed in Christmas clothes. Nari realizes that Christmas is approaching, and that she used to spend it alone, convincing herself it was just another day like any other. Looking at Jean, she realizes that maybe this year will be different. What does she mean by that? But she means that she will spend it gathered with the shapeshifter crew. When she realizes she's wishing for these things, she asks herself if she's secretly desperate for affection or something. Later in the basement, Hani says she has good and bad news. The good news is that she has finally found where that drug they're using to attack the shapeshifters is being produced. But the bad news is that a giant amount of chemicals is being transported there. Probably because they're making an absurd amount of chemicals, the effect it causes likely depends on the dose used. But they know that the drug causes the transformation from human to human. Whoever is behind this probably believes that kidnapping shapeshifters in their animal form is easier, unless they are of a large species. But why on earth are they trying to kidnap the shapeshifters? Haney wonders. Perhaps to reveal their existence to the world, or to use them as a collection. She worries about what is about to happen. Jim picks up the pen, pointing out the truck route on the map. He says that will be the ambush point. Since they don't know the enemy's intentions, it would be wise to simply put an end to this plan as soon as possible. Jim warns that they will strike tomorrow night at 11:30. He asks if Nari is okay with that. She says yes, and that she will try to do a better job this time. Hesitant, Nari comments that she also wishes that all of them would stay safe. If possible, it would be nice if they could just worry about everyday things, instead of always having to face. Just because they're shapeshifters, she adds that she would like to stay with them all the time, so if she can be of any help. But Jim interrupts, saying that he thinks she's misinterpreting things. There he goes, ruining everything again, saying that she has no place there. Since she is different from them, he adds that he appreciates her cooperation. But as soon as they find a way to break their bond, she will return to her normal life. Leaving everyone in the room in that awkward mood again, he can't contain himself. The next night, Nari watches as they are plotting a plan, thinking that perhaps she got things confused. After all, to those people, she is just an outsider who has nothing to do with their affairs. She remembers Jim's words, saying that as soon as things are resolved, she will return to her normal life. And she thinks that maybe she just wanted to belong somewhere. And because of that, she ended up being a fool. Jim realizes that for some reason she is acting different. What could it be, right? That's it, everyone. What did you think of this new series? I personally really enjoyed it. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you don't miss the next videos. Kisses, and see you next time.